One of my best friends, Tom, died a few years ago by suicide. It was a complete shock when I found out because I had no idea he had suicidal thoughts. And he must have felt so ashamed that he couldn't share that with us. And in your book, you write about how you spent a lifetime creating a front to give the illusion that all is well. What was that like for you?
Well, it's painful because you know what's going on inside and it's chaos. It's just madness. But you don't want the world to see because I was frightened I'd lose my job. And in those days, you would lose your job. So you're imitating who you think you used to be. But you can't believe nobody can see it. You didn't notice any. Did you notice he was sad at least?
I did. Yeah, I could see that he had struggled with mental illness and we talked about it. But
What did you talk about?
talked about his feelings and how he was working through it, and he was getting help from a counsellor, and I was encouraging him to ask for help. But I didn't know.
What were the thoughts going through his head?
I think he was someone he didn't share too much, but he did say he was struggling with mental health. He was getting help for it. But I think I do feel some guilt about it all. That
Yeah, I would think. I mean, I wouldn't think in a
Yeah,
horrible
I
way.
couldn't have
But
done more.
yeah, what do you see? You just saw that he might have mental health problems?
Yeah, well, I saw that he had mental health problems. I knew he was struggling. I knew he was getting help, but I had no idea how serious
Right.
it was. I maybe didn't think enough about how serious it was.
Well, you don't think, you don't think somebody will go that far. I've had people in my audience, in the second half we have question and answer. And there's people who've stood up over the years and said, I have cancer and I have depression. I always say, which is worse? They always say it's the depression. Because at least with the cancer, I mean, if it doesn't kill you, they have pity. And people say, oh, do you want to take some time off work? But depression has shame. And cancer used to have shame, but now we've taken over.
And how do we tackle that shame around mental illness?
Well, we do it the way every other taboo has been conquered. It's shows like mine, not that there are many, but that say there's no shame in this, and I'll tell you about mine if you tell me about yours. And the thing is, you have to say, my life isn't really hunky-dory either in some way, which I'm sure it's not. I'm sure you don't have depression, but you have to state, I'm not fine. That's the most debilitating. When people are fine, you think, yeah, I'm fine too. You can only do it with close friends.
Yeah.
But the words you choose are really important.
I often feel how lonely my friend Tom must have felt. That he felt like he couldn't share his suicidal feelings with anyone else. And I talked about that guilt I felt, that I couldn't do more. So
What would you have done?
I don't know, but I wish I knew.
Oh, right. So you draw a blank? Do you draw a blank?
I didn't think about it. I didn't think about how I could help.
Yeah.
So I want to know more about how can we help people who are feeling suicidal? How can we...
You're not going to... I always say that if you're a teacher, if you're working with somebody, not that you didn't, but look in their eyes. Sometimes it's too frightening, but when you have depression, I can only take you that far. There's a dead look, it's glassy and it's dead, and you have to recognize this is staying longer than just a half an hour. This is going on for days. Take them by the hand and say, would you like me to just go for, a few assessments with you? I'll be with you, I'll be holding your hand. Show them love. I don't know what you do when they say no. I don't know, you just love them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have minded somebody saying, do I feel like suicide? But the best thing is get them with somebody else who maybe doesn't feel like taking their life, but somebody who's that deep in sadness. So I wish there were meeting places or at least a Zoom. I run a Zoom called frazzlecafe.org. You go on free. But if you're really in trouble, we'll get you to somebody who will help you. If you want to just talk, which talking is half the cure, you're with your own people. So people it's a space where there is no BS. It's not like, let's perk it up. People speak from the heart, and that's so relaxing. I mean, you might be really straight with him, but then he's in an atmosphere at school where everybody's, it's very cool. You don't want to look down. The pressure is I think it's wonderful what you did, but he's not in an environment where he can be with his people. And half of it is finding your community.
Yeah.
And then you can say, I feel like taking my life, which I did to other people with my depression. And they'd go, yeah, me too. And it kind of meant we weren't going to because somebody else felt it. I don't want to go to somebody to talk me out of it. I want to be with somebody who says me too.
Yeah. So helping people find that community
Find your people.
is really important.
I know. I don't know why there isn't a line on, the closest we get are helplines, which is fine. I mean, it's better than nothing. But I'd like something to be a step up from frazzlecafe.org because we're not therapy. We're just talking. But talking in the way that humans should talk. And you're with, in my case, I do every other week. I have about 80 to 100 people. You don't have to talk, but you'll see people who are like you.
But you can listen.
You can be but you're there and your head is nodding. You're not, there's small groups too, there's breakout groups. And then you could say how you feel. And the people are trained enough because they're so used to being unfrazzled and saying, cut the crap. Here's what's really going on. I mean, underneath it all, we're all dark. We all have darkness. So why not discuss it? But as a young boy, I don't see how you could.
Well, needs to be the spaces like you've talked about, Frazzle Cafe.
Yeah.
And others to provide that community where you can share.
But if there isn't, the next best thing is somebody like you listening. You did the best you could. You did the best you could.
Thank you. Thank you. How can we help people speak out and ask for help?
Well, first, it's a male thing. At business, nobody wants to say, I'm having a hard time. People thought that Darwin meant survival of the fittest. People thought it meant the alpha, the bully. And that was only invented for the industrialists to be able to say, yeah, we're killers and so what, and the poor don't deserve it. He actually meant the one that cooperates best, the one that helps create that community. So I don't know where it started. Well, I think it probably started during the industrial age. So it's very difficult. It's almost a female thing to say, I need help, even though they also take their lives, but not as many as men. It's a weakness in this society to ask for help, and that's a tragedy.
Yeah. So what can we do if a friend or a family member or a neighbor is struggling?
I mean, they can talk to somebody like the Samaritans, and that's a warm voice. That's somebody who I feel would understand. And you can talk to them as often as you can. And so that's heat. That makes you feel not alone. So you've eliminated that one. But as far as understanding, really deeply understanding, you have to talk to somebody else who's experienced that.
Yeah.
And I wish they had a kind of Tinder for other people who are suffering. I really don't understand why we can't meet our own people on the street, because they're the only ones who understand.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't find anybody when I was suffering until I was in an institution. And then part of the cure is we could go, is this ever going to end? Do you feel like suicide too? And they would go, oh yeah, and it would lighten it up. Because what do we mean by it? It's sometimes, what do we mean by it? It's just too agonizing. It's not even that you can't express it. It hurts.
Yeah. And how did the stigma affect you around mental illness and even?
Well, I said I had to write a show, but I pretended it was a show just in general about mental illness. I just happened to talk about myself because I got on a roll. I thought my story, I made it funny, so it wasn't just whining, because the inmates I adored them, and it takes one to know one. You couldn't make fun if you weren't one. So I had to write about it, and then I got carried away of saying, suddenly it's difficult to form a sentence. Your body feels like it's being filled up with lead. Your mind is gone. It's gone. You need help to even eat something. You need help. Nothing makes sense. And your agency is vacated, and there's no more you. So almost you're not responsible for what you do in that state.
If one of your friends or family, you're worried about them, would you ask them directly, are you feeling suicidal, or are you thinking about taking your own life?
I think it's important that you don't feel afraid to say, do you feel like taking your own life? Because it won't put the idea in their mind. They would have had the idea. And, to bring it out in the open relieves, it relieves the situation. The pain, the pressure will come out of the tire if do you feel like taking your own life sometimes? Just casually. It wouldn't be that they never thought about it.
Mm. How can we make it easier for people to ask for help?
It takes an individual to start the ball rolling. Mm. It's not going to happen politically. So you did the right thing. You ask, you try to help, then the next person does, then the next person does. There should be rooms in schools and in companies where people, it used to be called the smoking room, where people could really say how they are. Mm. I mean, you could have started that, or I started it with frazzlecafe.org, you go on free, where there is somebody there. You can say, this is how I'm feeling. If you say the word, I want to take my own life, we'll tell you where to go. We won't just go, oh, well, that's an interesting thought. We will tell you where to go, and there's no shame in it. There's no shame in saying that, because when you're down, you do feel like it.
Mm. That's so helpful, because part of why I wanted to do this with you is to help other people in that situation. Mm. And while I felt like I could have done more,
you couldn't have done more.
We want others to feel empowered and brave and not afraid to help others reach out for help and ask how they are. So that's
you shouldn't feel guilt, though. I mean, you're a sensitive human being, and God bless people like you. You reached out. What more can you do? I mean, to me, being mentally ill is like being pregnant or not being pregnant. There's no sliding scale. There are people that disagree. There's anxiety sliding scales. But once you've got the real deal, it's hard to pass over that chasm. Mm. But all you can do is give them what you gave them.
No, thank you. Thank you. So your book ends on a
high note?
Very hopeful conversation with your therapist, where you talk about your excitement, I think, to enter a new stage of life, or the second stage.
Yeah.
How did you get to that point from where you were at the start to where you were at the end and feeling very hopeful about the future?
I've had depression a lot in my life, and I'm not depressed now. So when it decides to leave, the sun comes out again, and you're back to this. Mm. And this is, I'm back in my skin. But I may leave again, and you better notice, because the eyes will go first, and I'll have trouble articulating. And my husband can recognize it and say, it's time to change the medication or get in the institution, because I'm lucky enough. But there's happiness at the end of it, when you slide out of it and you have enough support.
So we need to notice in our loved ones any change. And
notice the change and keep them on that. They'll dip a little bit, but you can see a rise coming out. Yeah. Take them also into nature, if you can. I mean, I'm not saying that's an instant cure, but also change of environment. They should have let them out of school for a little while. Take them on a fishing trip or something. Because once the scenery changes, you're not reminded of your condition.
Yes. Well, you talk about scenery and spirit rock, don't you?
But that's extreme. Yeah. That's extreme. I mean, what I do isn't, that's nothing to do with mental. As a matter of fact, it can drive you mental. But the book, I'm Not As Well As I Thought I Was, is about somebody who was looking outside for meaning. But if there's rot under the floorboards, which there was in my case, there was a reason. And it took great therapy to get me down there. Mm. But the therapy had started before I got into the full mental state. It wasn't in the institution. And when I started to come out, I used it again.
What do you think is the main message that you want people to get out?
And I'm not as well as I thought I was. The message would be that somebody who's so extrovert, which in the beginning of the book, I go on these extreme journeys. I do a 30-day silent retreat. I migrate with whales. I work in a Christian monastery. No matter how successful somebody is, and if they have this disease, they can end up plummeting. So don't be fooled by winning a gold at the Olympics. You know that already. Or you're a famous whatever, or you're successful. if you've got this, you've got this. And it's something we have to, that's why there's a stigma. We can't talk ourselves out of it. This is the real thing.
And you talk about in the clinic, people saying, when will this end?
Yeah, there's a mantra that we always say, when will this get better? Will this ever end? When will this get better? Will this ever end? And we answer over and over again because we don't get tired of talking about medication or talking about how it's just as bad today, it's just as bad today. And when somebody else goes, it's just as bad today, there's almost a relief in it. I'm not the only one who's suffering. I'm not the only one. Maybe that should be something for people who are thinking of it, is they'd meet other people who are.
To find your people.
Well, and see what's going on in their mind.
And what would be your message to somebody who is watching this and is thinking, will this ever end?
I can only say, and you won't believe me, it will end. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here smiling. And I was in as bad a condition as you can get, thinking about taking my own life. I didn't want to take it. I wanted somebody else to take it.
And I hope for people listening, watching this, that your message about reaching out to others will make a difference.
Oh.
What would you like to say to people watching who are struggling at the moment or know someone who's struggling?
Well, get involved, but don't give the impression that you're separate. I'm sure there's some, talk on that lower level, the lower depths. That's how humans should talk to each other. Not all the time, because you come out to do comedy and you've got to do business. But sometimes we're not great. We have to admit that we're flawed, and that's what connects people. As a matter of fact, when I'm doing my show, and in the second half I said, I introduce people. Some people will have a problem, and then somebody in a balcony will say they have a problem, and I say, identify each other and then meet in the lobby. If you know anybody else at school or somebody else who's suffering, introduce them.
So helping people find each other.
Find each other. Yeah, find your people.
Yeah, so important.